Greetings, welcome to the latest episode of the Pandemic Podcast with me, Dan Astin-Gregory. Despite it being Freedom Day here in England, the COVID juggernaut steams ahead at full throttle, and our world leaders sing in unison to the tune of Build Back Better. What can we do as individuals to slow down, to stop the new normal? How can we get our leaders to listen? As thousands of people gather today in London to try and make their voices heard, I'm joined here by international health and wellness activist Pam Popper, co-founder of Make America Free Again, a streamlined movement that combines grassroots activism with hard-hitting lawsuits. Tonight, we're going to be exploring what we can learn from Make America Free Again, especially in tackling some of the issues that have surrounded the response to COVID-19 and now the mass vaccination campaign and its potential rollout amongst young people. So it's a pleasure to have you with us here, Pam. Welcome to the Pandemic Podcast.
Oh, thank you for having me. Lots to talk about.
Loads to talk about. Now, if we may, can we start with a little bit of a backstory? You're obviously the founder of Make America Free Again. But before we talk about that, your wider business initiatives, the Wellness Forum Health, would you mind just telling us a little bit about your trajectory around health and what led you to starting the business you have right now?
Yes, and I'll just correct you one thing. Make Americans free again, plural.
Gotcha.
Okay. Yeah.
I saw it. Yeah, thank you for that. Yeah.
Oh, well, because people go to the website, they can't find it, right?
Gotcha.
Yeah, so I feel, to a certain extent, I feel like I've been in training my whole life to do what we're doing right now and be in this mess, that we're in to help. So I started my business, Wellness Forum Health, 26 years ago. And the concept was informed medical decision making. That's the business that we're in. And my observation at the time is that if you take a look at the way people buy things, like when they buy a house or a car, or they get a retirement account started, or they buy even appliances, the typical things that people do are they look into it, they ask questions, they may consult with a couple people, they think about it in consideration with their value systems and what they can afford, and then they make a decision, right? And so most people, I'm 64 years old, and most of the things I did along that line in my life, I'm pretty happy with the results, mainly because they were well thought out, okay? Now, look at the way that people buy healthcare, if you will. I'll ask people, why do you take that supplement? And they'll say, my cousin sells it. Okay, so why did you decide to adopt a ketogenic diet? Well, my neighbor did it, and he lost 20 pounds. Okay, that's a good reason. And then, why are you having this surgery? Well, my doctor said I needed this $80,000 surgery, so I asked him what day I should show up for it. Right? This is ridiculous, obviously, right? People put more effort into buying a washing machine. And so my whole thing is to teach people how to start again and make your healthcare decisions based on risks and benefits. And this often involves going back and looking at previous decisions that were made. People are taking drugs they shouldn't have taken. They've been on diets that are health destroying and all that. And then we try to unravel all that, get them out of the medical mill, and then going forward to make decisions differently. And I think the hallmark sign that somebody has become an informed consumer when it comes to healthcare is when they can articulate to somebody else why they're doing what they're doing. In other words, I'm not going to get a shingles vaccine, and I can explain to you why. Not that you should have to, but I can actually articulate to you why I've made that decision. Then you know what you're doing, all right? It doesn't mean nothing will go wrong, but it means a whole lot less things will go on. It also means a whole lot less interaction with the healthcare business, which is why they don't like this, all right? We would reduce healthcare by 2/3 in terms of costs in our country, in the United States, if everybody did what I'm talking about, which is why they don't want that to happen.
There's such an important subject. In fact, I shared a message last night that I believe the terms safe, effective, and rare have never been more fraudulently used than they have in 2020 or 2021. At least that's my perception, but actually I haven't actually gone back beyond 2020 to recognize that. And I'm sure you'd probably correct me on that as well, because I think there's a lot of marketing information and then there's a lot of real practical information, and there's a huge gap between that. But one of the big benefits to myself for the last 18 months is reclaiming my choice around how I make decisions around my own medical interventions. I have made a couple of poor decisions in the past because I wasn't informed, whereas now I feel like one of the great benefits from the last 20 months, however long it's been, is that now I feel fully empowered that I will take full charge of my own medical decisions moving forward, given that the importance of doing so, taking good care of our health. You know, we're here supposedly within a health crisis, yet it's really become a political crisis, a social crisis, and a cultural crisis. We're not really talking about health, and we're not. I'm sure you and I could talk for hours about health here today, but it's such an important point. And I think if we segue that from your business work, what led you to starting Make Americans Free Again? Quite clearly, there's overlap with your previous work, but was there a point of catalyst? Was there an igniting moment that made you think I'm gonna have to do something now?
Yeah, absolutely. So you mentioned something very important, which is that this has been going on for a long time. And it isn't just a marketing message versus a practical, what's going on here. It's outright fraud, all right? So when an oncologist pats you on the hand and says, we're going to take care of you and give you the best care available, let me tell you what the English translation of that is. This $400,000 treatment won't extend your life by a single day, all right? But I don't even have to tell you about that because there's no criminal penalty if I lie to you or misrepresent or sins of omission. Maybe I don't even have to lie, just leave out some of the parts like you aren't going to live any longer, right? In the mortgage business in the United States, if you lie to a client signing a mortgage document to buy a house, you go to prison, right? So before I leave the planet, I'm going to make it so that it's against the law for the healthcare professional to lie to people the way that they do. That will mark my words. If it's the last breath I take, it'll be in a courtroom getting that to happen. So anyway, with this 26 years of dealing with these people and their fraud and their lies and their misrepresentations, the way that they hurt people, here we are in this. It's just a bigger episode of what they've been doing for decades and getting away with it. And for decades, I've been trying to do something about it. So have a whole lot of other well-meaning people, but clearly we failed or this wouldn't have happened, right? And so I thought to myself, I watched this for a while. I'm kind of a watch and observe kind of person before I do something most of the time. And what I saw was just like the criminals escalated what they were doing, all of the failed strategies got escalated. And let me tell you what they are. This will sound familiar. We're going to have a protest. We're going to sign a declaration. We're going to sign a petition. We're going to write to our elected officials. We're going to show up and talk to our elected officials because God knows if we present enough science and information, they'll change course, okay? If you're still hanging on to these thoughts of doing this stuff, you need to get over it or you're going to live like this for the rest of your life. I want to be crystal clear about it. So I watched everybody do that, and then I watched the same type of useless litigation that had been filed for decades being filed again, just more of it. So more of the criminal activity and more of the failed strategies that don't work, right? So I thought, you know what? I'm 64 years old, and this may be the last big thing I take on in my life. I'm planning to stick around for a long time, much to the chagrin of my detractors, but still, it's going to be the last big thing that I take on. So I thought I'm going to do two things. I'm going to write a book that tells in plain language what's going on here. Anybody can understand this. And then I'm going to start an organization, and we're going to fix this once and for all. And fixing this once and for all means a lot of things, including we're not going to do things that don't work. At this age, I'm just not doing it. So we don't do petitions and declarations and write to your officials and talk to them. We don't do any of that stuff, all right? We do things that work. And then we're going to solve this once and for all. So and it was about, I don't know, June, and we launched in July. And it was a very rushed, let's get something going quickly, and then we'll figure it out as we go along. But we've been pretty good at figuring it out as we go along, and we have a pretty well-oiled machine right now.
Great, and I'd like to talk about that well-oiled machine, but before we're going to get into that, I'd be really interested to know what were some of the first initial steps that you took. I think what's fantastic, what you've laid out there is that you're looking for what works. You're looking for the things that can move the needle, that can actually make a difference, not just in the short term, but over the long term. So what were some of the initial steps that you took on formation of the organization?
Well, I made a list of the things that I knew we were going to need to do. Lawsuits. We're going to have enormous numbers of people. If we ever hope to influence these politicians, we have to have enormous numbers of people. And I'm going to tell you how that works when you ask me about it, okay? And then we're going to have to solve problems that the government has no intention of solving for us. What are we going to do about the businesses that are flailing? What are we going to do about the education system, et cetera? So I made a list. The first thing that I did is I sat down with my staff here. You can't tell, but I'm in my office. Out there is a great big building full of people who I'm responsible for. And I had to know that they were okay with doing this because it was going to impact them in a lot of ways too. Everything from the time it was going to take me to do it to the phone calls and, you know, they've dealt with a lot of stress over the last year. Nothing like what I've dealt with, but they have dealt with it. And then I got a few key people together and we started making our plans. And we were very, very specific. I know that from my previous experience. I come from a business background before healthcare. So we were really, really specific, and we set a target date. And then we said, we're gonna make a lot of mess when we start this, that we're gonna have to watch every single day. How do we fix this? How do we fix this? How do we fix this? All these problems that come up when you start something new. And we've been pretty successful at it. I mean, there's always a new challenge, but I would say overall, I don't want to sound arrogant, but I think we have the most sustainable thing and the best chance. Nothing's guaranteed, but I think we have the best chance of actually turning this ship around and making sure it never happens again. So that's what we did.
Fantastic. And I will ask you about, you know, how you've brought people on board with you, but what was the first target that you set? You know, you had a landmark legal case on the 20th of November. What was the very first milestone that you were heading for, getting out the gate? Well,
filing a lawsuit. We filed actually our first lawsuit on August 31st in Ohio. And that was, we had to get litigation going. And I was reading these lawsuits. There have been 5,000 roughly lawsuits filed in the United States. And this just goes to how willing people are to do stuff that doesn't work again and again and again. That's what I'm fighting the enemy, but I'm also fighting people in our movement that just have an unlimited tolerance for it. I just don't. But most of those lawsuits, like 99% of them, failed. And so I was talking to this really brilliant lawyer in Florida who doesn't practice anymore. We were having a lot of like Saturday night conversations about what the heck do we do, right? And we got to thinking about this. The thing that everybody was saying in their lawsuits or claiming is our constitutional rights are being violated. They were. That's true. Mm-hmm. But the government's response was pretty interesting. They would say, you know, we know that. We're aware, but we have no choice because it's an emergency. And then the judges would rule in their favor. Well, we know there's no emergency, so we wanted to challenge the actual emergency declaration, because when you claim that there's no emergency and these people are committing fraud, the answer isn't it's an emergency. Now you put them in a very difficult situation. And then I think it's kind of a God thing, but shortly after, through a mutual contact, I met Tom Renz, who he had already started down that path, our lead attorney. And I think we might have been able to accelerate it because we raised money really quickly and awareness really quickly and that sort of thing. I had a big audience even before this started, and my book gave me a bigger audience to reach more people. So it was a great partnership, and that's how we got things going.
And that was the Ohio case that you won in November, is that right?
Well, we didn't really win it, but sometimes you win by filing. So let me talk about that. If the case is filed right, you put them on the defensive. All right. So I'll just tell you really briefly what happened. So my state, Ohio, is the model state. Everything, if you go back and trace what happened through this whole period of time, everything starts here and then it goes elsewhere. So we were the first to shut down, first to close schools, first to close bars and restaurants, first to require masks, first to quarantine, first, everything first, right? We were the first to have curfews. We were the first to have the vaccine $1 million lottery things first. And we know why, because at the time, our little emperor, back when he was the governor, was a popular governor in a very conservative state. He would play well on TV. He had the kind of that responsible, calm demeanor. So he was a good person to be the lead for everything, right? And he got to be a superstar. He was on all of the Sunday political shows every week, everybody admiring him for what he did. So he's got more and more full of himself. You could see that in the conferences that he did every day. So we filed on August 31st. And just to give you an idea of where we were on August 31st, he held a press conference at 2 p.m. And he said we were setting up quarantine camps for people who needed to be isolated. The federal government was going to reimburse him for it. He let that slip. And then he ordered all colleges and universities to set aside space to lock people up. That's where we were on August 31st. We filed 6 hours later, 6.5 hours later, never heard about quarantines again. We knew the exact date that the second round of shutdowns was going to happen. Again, we're the model state. We did not lock down again, all right? Everybody else did. California, Oregon, you heard about some of these horrible states, Michigan, they locked down again as scheduled, all right? We did not lock down. He imposed a curfew, from 10 to 5. We sent people driving around Ohio all night long, going into police stations, honking their horn. We were trying to get people arrested, couldn't to get them arrested. Then he said, we're going to crack down on the masks. If you get caught, if your establishment gets caught 2 times with people without a mask, we're going to shut you down for 24 hours. Well, I told everybody on my YouTube channel every week, no masks in here. He certainly knew he could come get me. And then we sent crews into stores to self-report. There are people without masks. They took pictures of their friends without masks. We couldn't get anybody shut down. There's not any evidence of shutdown of anybody. So he couldn't enforce his rules because he's in court in front of the judge now. All right. So what happened is the emergency order got lifted when we were due in court 2 days later. And we know he hadn't planned this is a this year thing. We know he hadn't planned to lift the emergency order because he made the Ohio State Fair virtual. It's a big event. I mean, huge event in Ohio. He'd canceled almost everything for the summer. And then all of a sudden, out of the blue, he says, go free. And it was because he was due in court. He hadn't planned on it. So the point is that, so we withdrew the case after he lifted the emergency order, and we hold no delusions that this is over and that he won't do something terrible again. But we put him on the defensive. Instead of Ohio residents being on the defensive, we put him on the defensive. And that's what you have to do. You have to think like a criminal, not be one, but think like one, and then figure out how to stop him. So life in Ohio is not as good as it should be, or it was. But if you have to live someplace in the United States that's an affected state, it's just better here than it is anyplace else.
Mm-hmm. So you challenged on the basis that the emergency status. I think we've seen that in Spain in recent weeks, actually challenging the constitution on the use of emergency legislation. Again, a successful start to that one. What happened from there? Because obviously this isn't the only legal case that you've taken on. Did that become a state-by-state approach where you're looking at other ways that you could tackle this legislation in different areas? Yeah,
we filed the same lawsuit in Maine. We filed it in Kentucky. It was filed in New Mexico. And then we started filing different kinds of lawsuits. In other words, once you don't have to file 50 times. What we've been doing is very gradually adding people to the legal team who are really good lawyers. So we're building our own national legal team that deals with health freedom. And again, I'll remind everybody here, we're taking a strategic approach to this. In other words, one thing I would tell everybody in the UK, stop running around, I call it pants on fire. We got to do something. We got to file something. Got to find a lawyer. Got to go. Everybody's just wrong. There's nothing going to. Because these people that we're fighting, they're very smart and strategic, and they have unlimited funds. And you're not going to run around like a chicken with his head cut off and fix that, right? So we've been very strategic. So we're building a national law firm, essentially, of great lawyers under Tom Renz's direction, who are going to address these issues, and we'll be doing it for the next 20 years. There's a lot to undo and fix and all that. And so we started taking on some other things. So we have an interesting case we took on regarding masks in New York. We have a quarantine case in Hawaii. And we've got some business closure lawsuits in Nebraska. And so we can branch out a little bit because they all go to the same thing, which is challenging that there was any reason for doing this in the first place, just coming at it from different angles. And then those different angles become important because, for example, if you win a lawsuit where a business owner recoups damages, well, then you can start filing those all over the place and you've got a precedent. And if you win a lawsuit on masks in schools, well, then you can start filing those all over the place and you've got a precedent. So we've been very, very careful to look at cases. I wish I could take on all of them, but we look at what is the strategically best thing to do next in this situation and how does it fit in with our bigger plan. And we do that not only with the litigation, but with all of the other things that we take on as well.
And then how do you find the specific angles? Because I think we've seen a number of legal attempts in the UK and we've not seen a great deal of traction. Finding the best angle to take that's gonna put the opposition, if you will, on the back foot.
The first thing is you make a lot of people mad doing it. I'm running a very disciplined operation, and I'm constantly telling people, settle down, okay? You got to stop the pants on fire, running around screaming, wasting resources. And again, people have a huge appetite for this nonsense. I call it nonsense. It is nonsense, all right? And they also have they don't take the time to really, when you can't think logically, I guess is what I'm trying to say, when you're running around pants on fire. When you start to think logically, you start to understand that a following means nothing. Like, people will tell me, well, Pam, you ought to get connected with so and so, she has a big following. No, she does, she has a big email database and all that. That's different. I'm building a group of people who are coming together and providing a lot of information about themselves and going to work with me, okay, to achieve very specific definable goals that we go about in a very specific definable way. Okay, so you'd be better off having 100,000 of those than 4 million followers, all right? I have a big following. I have people who read my books following. I've got people who watch my YouTube videos and other channels, but some of them are in other countries, which I think is great. I'm happy to educate everybody that I can. But when it comes to doing something in Ohio, I need Ohioans, all right? If we're going to talk about parents taking their kids out of school, I'd love to help people in the Philippines, but we got to do that in the United States, and it's got to be community-based. So the key is, I'm a very unpopular person sometimes, because I'm not all geeked up about following the herd. Let's go do something. You know, why aren't you showing up at the protest this weekend? Because it isn't going to make any difference. Why won't you come down to the State House and talk to representatives? Because it doesn't make any difference. You know, so people don't like to hear that. They want to do the easy thing. Not everybody, but a lot of people would like to do the easy thing, and it's easy to sign a declaration. It's not as easy to go to work, which is what I'm saying. Decades of laziness, and I'll just call it what it is, on the part of citizens is what helped create this. So if you think you're going to continue to be lazy and 12 people in Ohio are going to fix this for you, you're out of your mind, all right? It's going to take 80 million people to fix this in the United States, all right, by my estimation. And so are you going to be one of them, or are you going to sit back and email me every once in a while and ask me if I've solved the problem for you yet? Okay. I call things, one of the wonderful things about being this age is you really do start to get to the point that it's not that you don't care. I do care. I care about a lot of things, but I'm not particularly caring about whether people like me and all that. I care about being effective. We have a big problem to solve, and if we don't solve it, what's coming next is terrifying.
Yeah, I think we've witnessed, I've studied a number of different successful activist organizations and protest movements throughout history, and there's a lot of analysis that's been done on, for instance, the Occupy movement versus, say, Optor in Serbia as two contrasting movements, one that actually resulted in the toppling of a dictator and one that made a lot of noise and didn't really change anything. My observation of the movement in the UK was it's got a lot of energy around it, and it has, you don't get me wrong, it happens along the way. It is endangering somewhat to be in that kind of crisis mode with a lot of noise and energy, but not necessarily enough strategy and clear targets in order to actually move the needle and actually create change. And that's something that, I'm very keen to play a part in changing. Just done a big summit in the UK on Saturday. We're actually taking a very different approach, but I'd like to segue from here to talk about the objectives of the organization that you've formed. You mentioned you've got clear goals. Could you, and again, they are available on your website, but could you just walk us through the kind of core objectives you have over the short and mid to long term, and then we'll talk more about how you've managed to grow the support that you have.
Yeah, so the first thing is, and this was accidental, I claim no credit for this at all, but I'll claim credit for this. People said in the beginning, how much money is it going to take for us to fix this? I said about $100 million. And people said maybe more. Okay, well, how do you raise that money? You have to raise it $1 at a time, right? So how are we going to do that? Well, we're going to have to start getting people together and helping them understand what we're doing and getting them on board, right? So I got to lead by example. I'll start a meeting. So I started the meeting here in my office on Thursday. That's why we call them Thursday groups. But you could actually have your meeting on Tuesday. We're fine with that, But we had our first meeting, and then people found out about it. It's like, oh my gosh, I want to be part of that, right? I want to go. All right. So the first thing that happened that I noticed is that a lot of people needed to be around other people in an unmasked environment and just free to be themselves. And so we started becoming the way that people restored their social life. And this affected me too. I lost no clients over this, but I've lost a lot of alliances I had with health professionals and friends and even the charity organizations I was involved in. So everybody needed to make new friends, and all of a sudden they had new friends now. And that's one of the reasons they wanted to come every week. I get to see my friends. My new friends. My church excommunicated me because I brought up not wearing masks, but now I belong to a new church and all that. So that was one thing. Another thing is we still have this great underground thing going on all over the country where we have strong organizations. When everything was terrible, everybody knew where to go to get your eyes checked without a mask, dental care without a mask. So we live this alternative life here, all right, which we were very unaffected by a lot of this stuff, which contributed to better mental health. Now, to get into the project stuff, all right, the first thing that we took on, because lawsuits are like watching paint dry. It takes a long time for these things to go through the courts. So if you're going to keep people interested, you can do it with the social connections and that. But they also have to do productive work. And the other thing is, because everything going on is losing, decades of losing this battle, right? That's how we ended up here. Got to win. So we started taking on this thing. We called it small business rescue. The government has a plan to destroy small businesses, not save them. We are the counter to that. So what we would do, to the extent that everybody had the capability, is people would bring to the meetings and say, such and such a business is struggling. They may not make it. And then we'd figure out how to help them make it, all right? So an art studio, I paint, actually you can see one of my paintings that I did. I've learned how to paint. My friend and I go all the time to paint, and she was struggling. So we started having painting classes here in my office every month to help her pay her rent. And she got new clients out of it. Everybody like another chance for social action. And then everybody feels good. We're helping this person stay in business, that we're winning. All right. You see, we congregate, we win, we find new associations, we have our underground economy, we win, we save businesses, we win. All of a sudden, people don't feel so defeated about everything anymore, because we're not defeated. We are winning against them. Okay. The common enemy. And so that is still going on, because even though things are more opened up, there are still a lot of businesses struggling, and we try to really patronize the ones that were kind to us during the lockdown and that sort of thing. So that became a part of it, and we're going to need to continue that for a long time. We did a lot of getting children out of schools last summer, but we're getting more aggressive about it now, because the schools have psychologically damaged our kids. They have published online and through emails, and by demonstration, they're going to do it again for another year. So we now have teams of parents who've done this, who are going to help other parents. We're going to give free workshops to parents to help them understand what their alternatives are, the process of getting their kids out of school if they choose to do it, make sure that they have the right resources that they need and all that sort of thing. And we're doing this through our group situation. I think public education and most private education right now is not only inferior to what you can arrange on your own, but psychologically dangerous for kids. And this year, we're going to get 1 million kids out of school. It's going to take a long time. This will be an ongoing project. And then we're going to start this in August, our project to end medical censorship, which is everything from your doctor can't write an exemption for you without losing his medical license to deplatforming people. We have a very elaborate plan for that, but we got to get the school thing underway first. We try to take on one thing at a time, let it gain traction, and then start another thing. So those are the things that we're doing. And that'll keep us all really, really busy for a long time. And then, of course, we have to hold fundraisers. We have to raise money, because we're fighting against billionaires, and our folks are stuck with me. So we all have to raise money. And that's a constant everyday thing.
Yeah, no, I do want to talk about how you've grown your movement and where next, but I think I've just had some breaking news from the UK. I think that was really relevant to what we're talking about here. Allegedly, my team are confirming it for me now, but apparently Boris Johnson in the UK, Prime Minister, has stated that in September, once all the over 18s have had the chance to be vaccinated, proof of vaccination will be necessary for people to go to nightclubs and places where large crowds gather, which to me is a form of mandatory vaccination without being directly mandated. If you require, previously it was talked about proof of vaccination or proof of negative tests. As far as I can see from the news that's coming through now, it appears that part has been omitted. Whether that is still relevant, it's unclear, but it's looking like the UK is going down this track. They've already gone through the House of Commons around mandatory vaccinations for care home workers and other healthcare workers. And it seems like we're on a slippery slope now in terms of other areas of society. And I know this is a big, important component, informed consent, with your previous work. But here, in the face of potential medical mandates, what is your view on this situation, and what can be done to tackle these? With this being breaking news now in the UK.
Exactly what I've been talking about, because if you start these groups, okay, then you'll have your own underground economy where you can go where they don't do that, okay? I don't think they can do it here in the United States. So one big difference, and it's an advantage that we have, is that local government has a lot of power. So you probably have noticed, if you're watching, our federal government says, we're going to do this and this. They use an executive order, and then 26 states will pass a law, or the government will issue an executive order saying, nope, you can't do it here. And then it sort of like nixes the whole thing for them, right? So we have local government that has a lot of power that's helpful for us. But having said that, if that kind of nonsense starts here, and it is, colleges are requiring vaccinations, so your kid goes to a different school or takes a year off. The only way you're going to fight this is when you get lots of people together who support each other in fighting it, okay? So compliance is the enemy. So you got, and people need reinforcement. You don't want people saying, well, if I ever want to eat at a restaurant again, believe me, there are restaurants out there that are going to let you in without this. You need to patronize them, find who they are, support each other in supporting those people. And it can't happen. It doesn't happen with Zoom. People will say, we require our meetings be face-to-face, people in the same room. And people go, well, Pam, you could grow a lot faster with Zoom. Well, no, you can't. Again, don't confuse numbers of people. I have numbers of people already. You got to have people locally working together. I live in Worthington, Ohio. If I want to go to a nightclub in Worthington, Ohio that is not going to require ID, guess how that's going to happen? It's because people in Worthington patronize that place. It is not helpful for you in the UK to know where I go in Worthington. It's not even helpful for somebody in Cleveland, Ohio, to know where we're going in Worthington. They have to have their own thing going on. So everything has to be very, very local. And that's how you fight this. People get together and say, we're not going to comply. We'll be going someplace else. Or if you didn't go to a nightclub for a year, you'll probably survive. I did a video last Christmas, I'll just share with you, on Christmas morning, actually, because everybody was so sideways last year because Costco, which is a big discount store, was so dogmatic about the masks.
Yes.
Don't go. Yeah. Right? So I did a video. I'm 64. Never been to Costco. I do not have a membership card. Now, I'm sure some people are gasping out loud and saying, how does this poor woman survive? To my knowledge, there has been nothing awful that's happened to me. I've not suffered in any way, having never been in Costco. Seem to be doing fine, okay? We just have to get to the place where we start to say, what is important right now? What is important? Our future, the future of our families and our kids and our communities? Or do I really have to get on a plane so bad? If I don't take a vacation this year, I'm going to die. So I better go get a vaccine so I can travel. If you didn't travel for a year, you'll survive. I haven't been anywhere. Still doing fine as far as I know. All right. Other people might disagree with, my enemies disagree with me, but everybody seems to think I'm still mentally healthy in spite of the fact that I haven't had a vacation. I don't go to Costco. A lot of things I don't do, and I won't do because I will not comply. I will not help them do this. You have to have that mentality, and it only comes from that local connection.
You're absolutely right. My wife and I have already been very clear, whilst we love traveling, there's lots of things we enjoy, we will not be complying with the current state of affairs. And if that means foregoing on a temporary basis, when I'm talking temporary, it could be a year or 2 years or however it takes to overcome this, we won't be forced into making a decision that we don't want to make in terms of medical interventions in particular. And we would rather gather our energies in looking at how we can challenge this. And I think for me personally now, this, unfortunately, it's creating a situation which I find is really frustrating, is that we are essentially on the precipice of having to create a secondary ecosystem to serve portions of humanity who also choose not to comply. Now, that's effective in the short term. I think it's a good strategy, but unfortunately for me, it's I foresaw this happening when I started to see the direction, for instance, the World Economic Forum were going with their language and their objectives, is that it is creating a divided society. And I personally don't want to live amongst a divided society. I'm happy to go to a nightclub. I'm not that I go to clubs very much anymore anyway, but you get my point, where it's been built for the specific purpose because I'm refusing to participate in vaccine passports or vaccinations in this particular regard. But long term, I don't want to be going on holidays where certain family members or friends can't go, or I can't go because we're in a different medical status. I don't think that's sustainably for the long term. In the short term, I think it's the solution. My question to you is, how do we tackle this more broadly over the long term to actually not only to build short-term solutions, but reintegrate with a fuller society so that we don't create a divided society in the long term?
Well, we might have a divided society, and people may relocate to a certain extent. But I think what will happen is you get strength in numbers, and then you can take things on differently. And you and I were talking about this at the before we got on here. So let me tell you what I'll do with 80 million people. We gather up 80 million people. So how do we then start to solve this? Well, we have a big problem in that our elected officials are not very responsive to us. And part of the reason is we let that happen. We let them continue to get reelected and that sort of thing. But you can tackle these issues then. So I'll go back to last summer. Last summer, our little emperor, he converted himself from governor to emperor of the state. He's now just issuing orders that are completely unconstitutional, controlling people as if he's the king of Ohio, not the governor of Ohio. So our legislature, here's, I think it went on everywhere. There's not a single legislature in 50 states in the United States that did anything to help its people, all right? Mm-hmm. And there was no pressure. They all got elected anyway. So here's how you change that. And it can be done at the local level with county commissioners and mayors and this kind of pressure. So let's just take Ohio, for example. There were about 6 legislators who wanted to impeach the governor, get rid of him. Well, that would have sent a clear message. And the next person would have said, I don't want to be gone, so I guess I'll have to do what these people say. All right, so how do you get legislators? We only have 6, and we've got 138 or 200, I don't know how many people are in our legislature. How do you get them to come around? Well, my useless senator, she would not vote for impeachment, but we could have made her do it. So here's a sample conversation with a useless politician. Okay, so I'm going to introduce you to a new program that we have started. It's called Citizens in Charge. And I have brought a pallet of boxes into the office with me here. And let me explain what's in these boxes. All right. There are 19,500 and some people who are registered voters in your district who I represent. And here is what we want. We want the governor impeached. Now, you won your election by 500 votes last time, and you're up for election this year. So we don't care which of you is gone. The governor's gone, that's good, solves the problem right now. You're gone and replaced with somebody who knows we took you out. They'll probably do what we want. Either way, we're going to get what we want, because it is no longer acceptable for you to sit here and occupy space that we pay for and not do what we want. Now, we may have to take some people out to show that we can and will do it. And then when you sit down with their replacements, you say, listen, you probably know that you're here because we took the other person out. All right. Mm-hmm. So your choice, because we're happy to do it to you too. We don't care what party you're with. We don't care about anything else except we are not going to live this way. And there's a loudmouth person like me in every state who would enjoy having those discussions. I would take 3 months out of my life to sit and do it from 9 o'clock in the morning till 5 o'clock in the afternoon, every single day until they know we're serious. And you have to take them out. All right. And people say, well, there's election fraud. Well, you take out the people who are doing the election fraud. All right. There's only so much fraud they can get away with. That's kind of getting fixed in the United States, by the way. I don't know how much of it you're dealing with, but and you can't get rid of all of it. You can't solve all of it. But if you solve even some of it, all right, you start to gain traction and you start to be a group of people they're afraid of. Our problem right now is our politicians are not respectful of or afraid of their citizens. And I want them to be terrified of their citizens, as in the one thing that means something to you, Mr. Politician. You don't care about me. You don't care about my business. You don't care about our families or our kids or our health or anything else. You just care about being there. That's the one thing we can take away from you, and we will do it. All right. And you start putting people on notice that way, and you have to have huge numbers of people. All right, so it is better. This goes back to what I said before. You're better off having a conversation with a politician representing 19,000 people than a million people who show up for a protest and then go home and comply. Big numbers following, but you're not getting anything done. Again, you have to think strategically, and this is where I become unpopular. But Pam, protests matter. Show me how they've mattered. If you show me how they've changed anything, I'll join the party. All right, but they haven't. It becomes a street party. Everybody's showing force, and then it gets televised all over the place. The film goes viral, and then if the film goes viral, then you know you had a great day. You're still locked down. You still have no privileges, but people in Spain saw it, people in Australia saw it, so we rock, right? And I don't mean to be dismissive. I think this is all well-intentioned, but we are in the fight for our lives. This is good and evil, all right? And you're not going to reason with these people. People say, well, we just haven't put forth the right argument. Well, let's go back to World War II. I'm a World War II buff, right? So, gosh, if somebody had said to Hitler, I don't think you really understand the contribution that Jewish people have made to science and art, you think he would have said, oh, I had no idea. Let them out of Auschwitz.
Right, yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Let them go back to their businesses, right? You're not going to argue. You're not going to make any reasonable kind of conversation with these people. And everybody focuses on the 5 people in their elected officials' body that makes sense. If those 5 people can't change anything for you, they're nice people, and I admire them for taking a stand, but they can't fix anything for you.
Now, there's a couple of things here that I would like to pick up on. So, you're absolutely right. I mean, as we speak now, there's thousands of people in London gathered outside Parliament Square, various different places. We've had some huge protests in the UK recently. Between 1 to 2 million people speculated to be marching through the streets of London. And you're absolutely right. It was a party atmosphere. Everyone had a great time. I think there is merit in the protest in the sense that it gives people a sense of solidarity. I think over the long term, it gives people a sense of engagement where they previously didn't have it if it's the first time they've participated in a form of activism. But as a standalone tactic, that's all it is. If it's not combined with a very strategic set of initiatives that actually can affect change, then it just becomes a party, and it's just it's a feel-good activity. When you can direct that energy into focused work and campaigns and activities that, like lawsuits or other forms of influence over those in power, and switch from politicians in power to citizens in charge, I really like that terminology, then you can start to affect change. However, we've got a couple of big challenges here that I'd like to discuss. One is getting the people. Now in the UK, the movement is growing, but getting people not only to pay attention, but also to take action. And the two, I'd like to address both of those separately if we may. So firstly, getting people to pay attention in against all of the hysteria and the fear mongering that is effectively, it is dividing society. You've got people now who, the day before Freedom Day, someone was commenting here that they went to a supermarket today, and even though that masks are no longer required, everyone's still wearing masks in the supermarket. You've got this dissonance and the constant repetition of the fear-based message that is putting people in a trance. So to bust through that, to actually go beyond, a small critical mass, or is a small critical mass all that's necessary? What's your view in terms of, or should we spending attention trying to convert more people into seeing what's happening?
Well, yes and no. So great question. Okay, and here's the thing. We keep thinking, because the way that our society operated, and with all the social media companies and everything, we kept thinking that the way that you get things done is you develop a following. Go back to that term, the following. Yeah. Everybody wants to have a following. All right. So if I was living in the UK, I moved there tomorrow, and I'm going to help you guys do this. How does Pam develop a following? I wouldn't try to develop a following. Following is useless. You got a following. Somebody has a following. You got 100,000 people protesting somewhere. They had a following, right? Doesn't help anything. We have got to get back to the place where we understand what communication means. Communication is not posting something on social media. Communication is when I call my friend Mike and say, Mike, it's Pam. I haven't talked to you for a long time. Tell me what's going on in your life. Let's reconnect. What do you think about this stuff that's going on? You think it's ridiculous? Let me tell you what I'm doing about it. I want you to get involved with it. And people say, well, my gosh, Pam, one at a time, it's going to take forever. If we don't fix what they did, what we let happen, first of all, if we had these communities put together, they could never have gotten away with this because we all would have resisted and just refused to do it, right? But we have to go back and put these local groups of people together working in concert because they care about their local community. And better to have one new person in your movement than an announcement to a million, all right? So it's one person at a time. And I want to remind, I'm a World War II buff, I mentioned that. If you go back, my favorite period of time to read about, and I particularly like reading about people who were involved in the resistance in the underground. And I just finished reading a book called The House of Blood and Tears. It's about a story of a girl who grew up in the Netherlands, and when she was a teenager, was forging the ration tickets for 20-some thousand Jewish people to get fed in the underground. All right, these people were incredibly effective. There was no social media then. And you couldn't post a sign on a telephone pole and say, listen, or on a street lamp pole and say, listen, we're taking Jewish kids out of the country tonight at 11, meet at the town square, and we'll pack them in the cars and drive to the border. This was all person to person, one person at a time. I mean, phone communications were not even really secure or stable or available in a lot of times. So we got to go back to that underground, building a network, one person at a time. I would rather have a single human being, new person at my office for my meeting Thursday night than 10,000 people added to my following. Okay, get rid of that idea. Now, how we'll eventually convince people, I think, is first of all, they're having trouble. The despots are having trouble right now controlling everything. There is a little bit of rowdiness in the citizenry, and here in the United States, they're in big trouble. And the media does have to report some things, like Fauci's emails and that kind of thing. So they're having some problems. But having said that, that may do more to open the minds of somebody who's maybe thinking this has gone on for a long time and it doesn't seem to make sense anymore than anything we might say to that person. The important thing would be that you grow your network enough so that when that person says, I don't know about this anymore, somebody knows how to talk to that individual.
Yes. To me, I mean, I was talking with a member of my team about this. I've got friends who are very successful in multi-level marketing, network marketing, however you want to describe it. And I actually, one of them is the very top of his organization. And I messaged him saying, I need to talk to you because actually what you've done within your business is exactly what we need to do in this movement, because it's exactly that. It's person to person, conversation by conversation, movement making on a local level that once you do it on a local level starts to create a regional effect. It starts to create a national effect, but it's all localized. But he also told me that one of the greatest challenges is even if you get the people is getting the action. In multi-level marketing, you can build a big business of people, but if they don't do anything, you don't make any money. So in this sense, I see it to be true the same. Even if you build the localized networks, I love what you said about rather than having followers, you want people who are willing to take targeted action. How do you then, even when you start to build those localized networks, how do you inspire action? How do we lead that activity? Because having a lot of people is one thing, but having a lot of people who are focused and taking action is another.
You're never going to get them all busy. But the problem in network marketing, I have a background in that too. I was very successful at it. Most people don't inherently believe that they're going to become millionaires. Everybody wants to be a millionaire. If you ask 100 people, you want to be a millionaire? Sure. Okay. If you have magic dust and I could be one, I'd love that. All right. But then if you ask the person, I want you to think about this and answer the question after some consideration. Do you think that you're capable of being a millionaire? Do you really think that can happen? Well, I come from a family of dissident, free-thinking people, and I would have said, sure, I'm going to be. I mean, my grandparents didn't speak English. They did it. Pretty sure I can, right? You ask somebody else and they'll go, oh, I mean, that doesn't happen to people like me, right? So you're going to get a variety of answers. So I think the thing that we have to, our responsibility as leaders is to give people something that they can do, not useless something they can do, go to the protest, but something they can do. So let's go back to small business rescue, okay? So do you think that you could commit to buy lunch from this restaurant once a week? Can you do that? Yes. Can most people do that? Yes. Will you spend $10 a week helping this restaurant stay in business? Yes. Okay, now we got you doing something that's productive. Okay. Would you be willing to help assemble this Excel spreadsheet so we can email the people about the parent calls? Or you're a homeschool parent. A homeschool parent may say, I'm never going to be a millionaire, but could you explain to another parent how you homeschool? Would you do that? Yes. Would you be willing to be on a conference call and answer questions? Yes. So it is our responsibility to find people to do the things that we need for them to do. Now, not everybody can do what I'm doing. Not everybody would take the threats and the whole 9 yards, and I understand that. I don't ask anybody to do this. But you're a person who's unidentifiable on the phone helping parents get their kids out of school. You can do that. You can spend money at this business. So that's what you have to do. It's a wonderful question. How do you get people to actually take action? And it's a whole lot harder to get people to sell something to somebody than it is to get them to patronize a restaurant.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's effectively it's a much simpler model. But again, in many ways, it's systemizing the education and recruitment of people that can participate in that, and then celebrating the success of those who, have every week gone to that restaurant, and then showcasing that to others and say, oh, I can do that as well. I'll do that. I'll join you. And all of a sudden, the restaurant's packed full of people who are doing the same thing. And that's how that ripple effect creates a wave, and that's how movements are built. And that's, right. I think,
you have to make people feel good. All right. So to give you an example, we had an illegal fundraiser with 400 people. We had a big underground movement here that you were supposed to have more than 10. We had 400. And so one of our, and how does this all happen? Well, it just so happens. Everything happens through the Thursday groups, by the way. Whatever you need. I needed a new biology teacher for my school. Thursday groups. People need whatever it is. You need a handyman? Thursday groups. That's how you find handyman. All right. So anyway, one of our Thursday group members had bought a very old and kind of iconic ballroom with a couple of partners. And they put $1 million into renovating it. And then everything got canceled except the mortgage, right? And so so he said, listen, you can use my place, okay? We just want the cash bar, all right? Business partners were kind of nervous about it and all that kind of thing. But so now we had a place to have a fundraiser with 400 people. We had a pretty good communication way to get everybody to buy tickets and all that. And we disclosed the location the day before. Okay, so first of all, we're winning. We're having a clandestine group of 400 people for a dance party, raising money for attorneys. Our government doesn't like our attorneys, of course. And then we get there, and this guy's business partners are watching 400 people buy drinks. This is the most money they've had come in a year, and they're thanking everybody, and everybody's like, "Oh my God, this is so great! We're having such a good time, and we're helping these people who own this business." And so people bought a $40 ticket, and then they bought a $10 drink, and all of a sudden, you have just that. You feel good about their success happening here, and we're beating them at their own game because they didn't know that we did it. So it requires some thinking. But a lot of it requires, I think we have to deprogram ourselves from addiction to social media, and from thinking that, and I've got into this too. I can't tell you how many times I would say, oh, I support such and such an organization. Well, what did that mean? I put my name and email address in their database, and I send them $25. Boy, I rock, don't I? I don't look at that. And then I wait for the people to tell me they solved the problem that I'm interested in having solved. Well, this is pipe dreaming, all right? So now we got everybody involved in solving the problem that we need to solve.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, you're absolutely right. It's activating individuals in the process of change and solving the problem on a local level. I think that's very, very clear. Now beyond, I suppose, beyond the pandemic, I think you and I both share a vision for a transformed world, and actually building new systems and structures beyond this. To replace what we've known for so long. How do you intend to mobilize what's happened here to that longer term vision?
Yeah, so the first thing, I'm 64. As long as I've been a thinking adult, which isn't my whole adulthood, I think I started thinking when I was 30. So as long as I've been a thinking adult, I've heard about education reform, government reform, medical system reform, and it gets worse every year. Has gotten worse every year. So we had to blow it up to rebuild it. And I talked about that in my book, what happens next, and let's look at it as a potential for fixing all of this stuff, because when it doesn't exist anymore, you can rebuild it, right? Well, we don't have a government anymore, representative government, so we can strong arm them in the way that I talked about. When the school buildings are empty, you'll be shocked at how accommodating they start becoming to parents. Because when these teachers who are all for all this nonsense don't have jobs, they do remarkable turnarounds. It's amazing how fast you can turn somebody around if you're willing to use the point of leverage that you have. You're not going to reason with the school system to get them to change their ways. You're going to take your kid out, and when the buildings are empty enough, they're going to say, what do we have to do to get kids to come back to school? And maybe they will never come back to school. Through this whole process, I've learned a lot about the superiority of educating your own children. And if I had kids right now, I wouldn't send them to school no matter what. And then from the healthcare perspective, this is kind of interesting, but in 2013 and 14, we wrote a business plan for an alternative healthcare system, much based on the model of what happened with the automobile industry here in the United States. We used to have 3 big car makers. They made cars that were overpriced and people didn't like, and they didn't work very well, actually. And then the foreign car makers came in here, and Honda did not start doing business in the United States by going to General Motors and saying, listen, we have a lot of good ideas about how to build cars. Let's partner and we'll show you how to do it. They just built their own plant. They opened their own dealership. So we wrote a business plan based on that model and estimated that we needed to have access to about 10 million people to be able to make it work. Well, it looks like I'm going to get that to happen. And I can do it with my own money if we get to that point. So I won't have to ask anybody for anything. I'll just be able to provide. In other words, here's something I can do for you, and then it'll pay for itself. If I can seed it, then it'll pay for itself after that. So I think that we'll be able to do that, but you sometimes have to just deconstruct it and then rebuild it, and that's what we're doing here.
Absolutely agreed. Now, the last thing I'd like to ask you about is the book itself that you've written. I know I've seen it's available in the United Kingdom and in different parts of the world, because I know people want to be able to learn more about your work, and we can talk more about some of the videos you do. But the book itself, could you tell us a little bit about the book and what led to that being created and what it's all about?
Yeah, so it's called COVID Operation, What Happened, Why It Happened, and What's Next. And I wrote the book because I think people need a straightforward, you can watch all these videos all day long and you get snippets of knowledge, but you don't really put it together into what actually is happening here and how it happened and who's telling the truth about what and that kind of thing. And I'm known for, I'll just tell you, I'm a perfectionist, OCD lunatic who can drive anybody crazy if you spend enough time around me. But one thing is that if I write that something is true, I've checked it out to the place you can take it to the bank. So if you watch my videos, I don't make a lot of the sensational claims about, being controlled technologically by Moderna or, people make claims about all kinds of things, and maybe that will happen, but I don't make any statements that I can't back up 67 different ways. And so this is the truth about this in a very readable form. Okay, and it's a story, and it's told in a way that you can see the sequence of how this started, and then how it gathered steam. And I mean, the origination of it goes back, decades, right? And how this happened, and what's really going on here. And I think that anybody who's thinking about doing something like what we're doing here in the United States could learn a whole lot about why you want to do it the way that we're doing it. It's a pretty good read too. People tell me it reads like a John Grisham novel, only it really happened. Yeah. That's available in the UK as well. We put the links in the comments as we go, but we'll make sure that's shared around. So thank you for showing that, Pamela. So we're coming up to the end of the interview now. Could you, in terms of what actions that people can take from here to find out more about your wider work, where's the best place for people to check out the various things that you're working on? Yeah, so first of all, I put out a newsletter and 4 videos a week, and it's free. And you can subscribe by emailing me at pampopper@msn.com. You just send me an email. You can go to our websites, wellnessforumhealth.com, makeamericans.freeagain.com. You can join. We have members in 33 countries at Wellness Forum. So if you want to learn how to be an informed medical decision maker and how to get yourself out of the medical mill, and the kinds of questions people ask. I'm taking this drug. Should I or shouldn't I? This doctor says I need this test. Should I or shouldn't I? And we have 3,500 hours of educational programming on video. We offer live teleconference that people all over the world can participate in. So lots and lots of resources there. But I give away a ton of information free every week. And you just send me an email and I'll add you to the subscriber list.
Thank you for that. I've shared that again in the comments. Now, the weekly calls you have with Make Americans Free Again is clearly American focused, but is there scope for people outside of America tuning in to kind of get some ideas around what they could do? For example,
we post the recording on our website, so you can go and listen to it. And here's the best advice I can give you, is that sometimes you just have to get started. And so someplace, if you've got a lot of people listening to this, somebody's saying, well, I do it if somebody else did it. Yeah, okay, so I just said I'm going to do it. Okay, I needed people around here to think it's okay because I knew they were going to pay the price. But then I just started. And the first meeting, we had 5 people. 3 of them worked for Wellness Forum, 2 outsiders. That's it, right? And the only group going on in the United States of America, right here, 5 people, 2 who weren't working for me. And then look what happened, right? So don't underestimate what you can do, and you'll find each other. Once you get started, you'll find each other. People email me all the time and tell me that we finally, I hired a person to handle our groups, and people write every day and go, I started a group in such and such a place in Iowa, and I'd love to be affiliated with you, that kind of, so everybody will find everybody, but you just have to get started. Don't wait, just do it.
Yeah, the classic ready, fire, aim. Absolutely. You can tell the entrepreneurial spirit that's flowing through your work. So I want to say thank you so much for your time and energy today, and some real clear insights, on a day where, London is crowded with protesters again today. Where we go from here is the next important question we ask. And I think that strategic approach is what we need to see locally, regionally, nationally, internationally. And eventually, I think we will all be working towards the same aims and hopefully creating some real traction to tackle some of the really serious issues that are on our doorstep right now. There's a lot of money and people that have been involved in getting to where we are today, and it's going to take a lot of money, people, and resources to get us out of it. So start now, I think, is the clear message.
Yes, absolutely. Just do it.
Thank you, Pamela. Great to have you. And again, thanks to everyone who's listened live on this special episode on the Pandemic Podcast. If you haven't done so already, please do subscribe. It'll take you just a moment of your time to go to danjgregory.com/pandemic. You'll keep up to date with all our latest content and interviews like this. And also, if you weren't aware, at the weekend, we hosted a one-day lockdown summit in London where we covered much of the critical evidence. It's the first summit of its kind to conduct a critical review of the response to COVID-19 and to explore how we can move forward from here. The replay is now available at questioneverything.io/replay. We're joined live by over 250,000 people around the world. So please do go and check that out to hear exactly what we were talking about on Saturday, in addition to any activities that you are planning to take off the back of today's episode. So thank you very much once again to Pamela and our audience here today, and good night to everyone, and we'll see you again tomorrow.